What's up, everyone, and welcome to the Entrepreneur Cast, your source for tactical lessons in entrepreneurship from a cast of entrepreneurs. I'm Jayson DeMers,
And I'm Sam McRoberts.
and today we're going to talk about the 9 reasons businesses fail and what to do about it.
Awesome. So the first one that we've come up with that I think is really interesting is, right in our bailiwick, and that's marketing woes. It'd be nice if you could just build it and they would come, but unfortunately in the real world, that rarely works out that way. So when you have a business, almost regardless of what kind of business, you have to have some sort of plan in place for marketing. Like, how are you going to get this in front of people? How are you going to convince them to use you instead of somebody else? What sets you apart? Where do those messages go? And a lot of businesses don't. They take the field of dreams approach and they build something really cool, and then they just magically hope that people will show up, and that doesn't work.
Yeah, it really doesn't. And what kind of marketing, Sam, do you think is sort of most effective or best ROI for a startup or for someone who's an entrepreneur? What would you recommend?
It depends. It depends a lot on your specific market. It depends on where your customers spend their time. It depends on your budget. It depends on your industry. I think there's a lot of it depends. I would say, obviously I'm a little biased, but SEO is one of the best ROI marketing channels long term, but it has a really, really slow ramp up if you're doing it the right way. So I think every business should have a plan for SEO in place from the get go, but that shouldn't get all of your budget, right? That should be a relatively small part of your budget up front. And then looking at other channels, if you're in an industry where you can do marketing, social ads, paid search, that can be really effective. But it's going to depend a lot on the individual business.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think we're a little biased. We're both SEO experts, and so we tend to sort of jump to SEO pretty quickly. I would say that content marketing goes hand in hand with SEO, and so make sure you've got a content marketing strategy. I think that works for pretty much all businesses, wouldn't you say,
Yeah.
Sam? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think of marketing a lot like investing. You don't put all your eggs in one basket when you invest, and you really shouldn't do the same thing with marketing either. But your exact mix of marketing tactics is going to depend on your resources and your risk assessment. And so, like SEO, SEO is like planting seeds, and you're going to need those crops down the road, and you want to make sure the seeds are in the ground and the pieces are in place, so that down the road you can harvest those, and in the meantime, you focus on other things that provide immediate gains. That's just how I think of that.
Yeah, you just reminded me actually of an article that you wrote probably 10 years ago, Sam, called, I think, Investing in Marketing or SEO, the Warren Buffett Way. Do you remember that?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Investing in SEO the Warren Buffett way.
Yes, it is like an investment. Well, good. I totally agree. So that would be number one, marketing woes. I'm going to go for number two. I'm going to say having wrong pricing. So, if your pricing is too cheap, well, that can actually make your service or product less attractive to customers because they think, I don't want something that's cheap. But if it's too expensive, well, that's pretty obvious that, you're going to potentially drive away potential customers. There are also different ways to serve your product to customers in the sense of you could have a free trial. If you're a SaaS app, you could have a freemium model, which is very popular these days as well. And really, there's a lot of strategy that goes into how you price your product. And so it's important that you do research of your target market, find out who they are, find out what price point works for them, do some testing and find what works and stick with it. You can run
Yeah.
surveys if you need, things like that to find the right pricing. It's a common problem that causes businesses to fail.
I actually think that pricing is probably one of the trickiest things to do as a business, because there's a lot of ways to approach it. I think a lot of people will jump in and say, okay, well, what are my competitors charging? And let's charge less, right? The first thought is, can we undercut our competitors and provide something better for less money? And unfortunately, competing on price alone, especially if you're trying to be the cheaper option, is a race to the bottom. Generally, that's a bad idea. It's better to come in and say, honestly, like, are they charging enough? Could I offer more and charge more and position myself as the premium option? I think that's generally the better way to think of it, but it's not always the first thought. And to the other thing, like whether it's a free trial or a freemium, like you really got to carefully consider what it's going to cost you to support those users, right? If you end up with a ratio of like 99% free to 1% paid, can you afford to cover the cost of all those free folks and all of the emails that are going to come with it and the support issues? On the flip side, going back to pricing high, though, you have to consider like the more money you're going to be charging for something, the greater your cost per acquisition is going to be. So is your increased cost per acquisition going to justify the lifetime value? It's this careful balancing act, and I think it's actually very difficult to get right.
Those, yeah, I agree. I mean, those are good points. When I think about a company that came in with a higher price point than the competition, I got to think about the Apple's iPhone. This is
Yeah.
what comes to mind. I mean, they came in, they outpriced, as far as I'm aware, pretty much everyone else in the market. But look at what it did for them. I mean, that has been their main revenue driver since then.
And
So,
their margins are insane, 25 or
oh yeah,
30%
yeah.
net margins.
And I think that a big reason why people buy the iPhone is because it's so expensive. They want to feel like they've got the biggest, baddest, newest tech in their pocket all
Status
day.
signaling. Yep.
Yes, yes. They want to be at a table with their friends holding an iPhone, the latest generation, because it makes them feel like it gives them that status. Exactly. Yeah,
And the quality justifies it though. They
it
they
does.
last for years. I mean, my wife I think is still running an iPhone 6, and it still
Nice.
works close to perfect, starting to slow down a little bit, but they're just, they're spectacular. It's worth the money when you spread it out, amortize it over time.
Agreed. Agreed.
So, number 3, I'd say lack of understanding of customer demographics or their target audience. And that kind of fits really closely with pricing. If there's a disconnect between pricing and audience or vice versa, that can be a problem. Now, I'd say a really common mistake with understanding customer demographic is thinking, well, I've made something that's wonderful for everybody. Like everybody's going to love this. And that, maybe that's true. Maybe it is something that anybody could like, but you're much more likely to be able to grow a business quickly if you pick a niche. Narrow it down, go after somebody very specific initially, and you can always expand later. But it's a lot harder to go for everybody and then niche down after.
Yeah, I totally agree. For number four, I'd have to say failure to delegate. And uh, when I first started out as an entrepreneur, I tried to do everything myself, and I've talked to a lot of other entrepreneurs who did the same. I know
Super common.
well, it's scary, right? To get to try to give away parts of your baby, your creation, to trust that to other people. In some cases, people who you've never met. That's scary, and it can be hard to let go. But it's really critical. It's necessary to do it if you're gonna expand. Because as an entrepreneur, as a leader, you should be doing only those tasks that you can do best. Otherwise, you're not spending your time most efficiently. And this is a hard lesson to learn. And so when I first started out, when I was really even before I started my business, I was running a network, not a network, but I was running a whole bunch, like 50 micro sites, as you could call them, and they were all just websites that were focused on one specific keyword. And I was trying to drive Google AdSense revenue to these sites, and it was a fun thing. But I learned a lot from this. But one thing that I learned was this lesson of you have to delegate. There's no way I could manage all those sites and all the content and all the link building to those sites on my own.
Yeah.
And so I heard about this site called onlinejobs.ph, and it's still around. And this site is set up for Filipino virtual assistants or VAs to pair up or match up with American businesses so that American businesses can find overseas offshore employees who can help with various administrative tasks. These so I perused onlinejobs.ph. I looked at resumes, I interviewed candidates, and I hired my first employee through onlinejobs.ph. And it's really good because the cost of living is so low in the Philippines that it's a good way to get somebody at an affordable, reasonable rate if you're in the US. That turned out to be one of the best things I ever did because that employee that I hired stuck with me for the next 9 years. And
That's
she
awesome.
became, yeah, she started as a content writer and then worked her way up to project manager at the agency that I had founded and ran before I was doing email analytics. And to this day, she's still there. She's a phenomenal person. I got to know her and her family, and her as her children were born. I was there. I would highly recommend checking out onlinejobs.ph if you're looking for affordable overseas help. That is how I delegated, and that's how it enabled me to succeed. And that relationship lasted for years.
Yeah, delegating, I mean, I think that's critical, right? Like you can't scale your time, only so much. And I think the hardest part is that you have to recognize that for some things, maybe the person you get to do it won't do it as well as you, but that's okay as long as they can do it well enough. And in a lot of cases, like sure, you may be doing it to the 99.9th percentile, but is 95% or 90% like is it okay? It's okay to pass things off, especially if they're not business critical or if you have a plan to pick it up if it falls down. But
Agreed. And remember, perfection is the enemy of progress. It is so true.
yes,
Don't aim for perfection. You will be held back.
good
It's
enough
true.
is very often good enough.
Hmm.
Number five, I would say businesses that aren't set up to scale. Maybe they know how to get to point A, but they have no clue how to take it all the way to Z. And that one's also tricky because, a lot of people who start businesses are just learning on the fly. They don't know what they don't know. They don't have the experience to foresee some of those problems. And so it's like, all right, well, now I need to hire people. And now I need to handle payroll. And now I need to handle taxes. And now I need an office. And now I need an office manager. And just like these things stack up and you start getting outside of your wheelhouse. And if you're not really good at adapting and putting in systems that can help your business to scale, house of cards is going to fall down. And so I think, setting out to understand what it takes to build different businesses at different levels. What's it take to get to 1 million a year? What's it take to get to 10? What's it take to get to 100? And at each different scale, you're going to run into a different set of problems. And the ideal way actually goes back to delegation, which is bring in people who've done that piece of the puzzle before to help you spot your blind spots and who know what kind of systems you're going to need to make that jump.
It's true. You don't know what you don't know, and that's why you need to hire other people and delegate. So for number six, the next one would be getting out competed. The best example that I can think of with getting outcompeted would be in the current coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. Look at Zoom. Zoom is a perfect example of a company that came in and has outcompeted the competition. They're not the newest company in the field, but it would be arguable that they're the simplest, easiest to use, and they've gotten a ton of PR and press because of their expertise and because of what they're doing and because of how easy they are to use and because it just works.
Yeah, they
So
went from what 10 million users to 200 over the course of a couple months.
yeah, yeah, and Zoom is a tool that I use every day. Why? Not because there aren't other tools out there. I've got other icons from other tools on my desktop, but Zoom is the easiest, the simplest. It just works, like I said, and so I use that. It's the lowest barrier to entry if I need to do a Zoom call.
The
So
custom backgrounds are pretty cool too.
yeah, that's true. That's true. So absolutely, if you're an entrepreneur, be careful about being outcompeted. Have an offensive game plan and go
Yeah.
out there and be better.
And you need to keep an eye on your competitors to see what they're doing, see if they're doing something that might outcompete you, but you also have to balance that with not obsessing over your competitors. Don't follow everything they do. Don't worry if they're doing something you're not. Try and understand at the core level what it is your customers want and need and deliver that better than anybody else. That's how you outcompete. It's not by adding an endless number of features or changing your messaging. It's like, hey, the people who use us, what are the things they love? What are the things they hate? Give them more of what they love, less of what they hate. That's it. That's all you really need to do to outcompete your competitors.
Simple advice, but good advice. Absolutely.
Number seven, another one that fits well with what we're seeing right now, black swan events, right?
Yes.
Coronavirus, nobody could have anticipated it. 9/11, the housing crash of '08, like all of these things, every now and then something pops up and takes you by surprise. And it actually doesn't have to be global. It could be something else entirely. It could be the warehouse where you stored your inventory for your e-commerce store burns down or floods and you didn't have the right insurance in place, right? Like single points of failure in unexpected areas are dangerous. And I would say one of the best things you could do to avoid that problem is to think through ways to make your business anti-fragile. Um, not just strong, right? Having the right insurance or having fallback payment processors, but actually setting yourself up in a way that when things go wrong, you have a way to benefit from it.
Agreed. For number 8, I would say it would be failure to control your burn rate. So this is one that hits close to home because for me, I nearly had to close down my business probably 7 or 8 years ago. This is early on, where it was actually as a result of seeing so much growth with my business that I overestimated how much employee help I would need. I overhired, and before I knew it, I had too many people with not enough stuff to do. My burn rate became way too high, and the temporary revenue boost that I was seeing turned out to be just that. It was temporary, and my revenue could no longer support my burn. I had to make some really, really difficult decisions, and any entrepreneur knows, at least for me, that firing is the most difficult and most hated part of being an entrepreneur. I hate firing people.
Sucks.
It sucks. I had to do a lot of it that month in order to save my business. I did learn
I
a
remember
lot.
that.
Yeah, it was hard. Personal moment of truth here, but my wife, she was my girlfriend at the time, but now my wife, she had asked me, you've been seeming weird, different lately. What's going on? And I remember I slouched against the wall and I broke down, and I couldn't control my emotions, and I admitted to her that I had made big mistakes in my business and that I thought things were going to fail, and that the only way out of my predicament was I was going to have to significantly cut staff. Uh, she helped me through it. The next day, I made a lot of phone calls that were very difficult, and the reason why I made phone calls is because we all worked 100% remote, so all of us were working across the country and across the world. So there was no face-to-face opportunity here. But that's a story for me that still hits close to home. But it's a lesson that I had to learn, and I think many businesses learn it a harder way than I did because I survived it. Uh, but
There's a saying, I can't remember who said it first. Maybe it was Paul Graham, but hire slow, fire fast. And
yes,
unfortunately, that gets flipped the other way too often. But like on the budget side, I remember hearing with the coronavirus thing in the U.S., it was something like most small businesses wouldn't last 2 to 3 months without cash flow coming in. They couldn't even handle a 2 to 3 month buffer. And, in the startup world, like if you have less than 6 months of runway, you're on fire. Like that's not good. You need to be raising immediately. And most startups try to have at least 12 to 18 months or more of financial runway so that even if they aren't making any money, like they have some timeline to figure things out, make changes, keep people on payroll. You definitely need to plan ahead. You need to understand your burn rate. You need to have a budget. You need to keep an eye on it. Hire slow, fire fast. I think all of that is critical.
yeah, I learned that lesson, and hopefully, if you're listening to this and you're facing a similar situation, you don't have to learn it the hard way that I did. But
Seriously, learn
it's
from
not
others.
easy. Yeah, learn from others. Yep.
Well, for our last one, I'd say number 9, the market changed, right? So if something changes in your market, demand is different, people want something else. A few things came to mind. Fidget spinners, 2, 3 years ago, huge craze on fidget spinners. Now they've
Yes.
basically disappeared. An old example like pet rocks or pogs or beanie babies, right? The things that pop up, they're huge for a while. They last for a couple years, if that, and then poof, gone. And yeah, like if you're really good at timing things, you can get in there and make some good money and get out when it's over and move on to the next thing. But you need to be careful when you're starting a business that you're not starting a business that's built on a short term trend. And there are some ways to spot that. Like a good one is if it rises really, really fast, it will probably fall really, really fast as well. If it's a slow, gradual increase, it's much more likely to stick around for the long term.
Kind of
So be
reminds
careful.
me
Be
of
careful
the
about. Go
cryptocurrency
ahead.
boom. Remember that? The cryptocurrency boom and
Yes.
had Bitcoin and everything. Look how fast that went up, and look how fast it crashed.
So fast. Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
been it's been crazy ever since, right? Everybody in
Oh yeah.
crypto is still like waving the crypto flag, but they have an incentive to do so. And if you've watched what's happened with crypto during this whole corona crisis and the stock market collapse, like crypto and the stock market were pinned. When the stock market tanked that day, crypto went right down with it.
Yep.
Um, So it's not quite the panacea that maybe some people have tried to pass it off as.
It's
But
pretty eye opening. Yeah.
keep an eye. You've got to keep an eye on your market. You got to watch for when things start to change. And one way you could do this would be with like Google Trends. Keep an eye, because Google Trends will actually project out where they think the next month's worth of traffic is going for that term. So keep an eye on that. If it's starting to trend down and Google's projecting a dip, like maybe have a plan in place to handle that.
That's smart. Yeah, look into your crystal ball with Google Trends, and you try to predict trends and get ahead of them. I think that's good advice.
Well, there we go.
Yeah, thank you everybody for listening to this episode of the Entrepreneur Cast. These are the 9 reasons businesses fail, and hopefully you've learned a bit about what to do about these if one of them were to happen to you. So thank you all for listening. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if you'd help us out, make sure to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review, whether it's in iTunes, Overcast, wherever you do your listening. But that would help us out a ton.
Absolutely.
Cheers.